The first breath of Alcatraz hit like a slap of salt and rust. Frank Morris stepped off the launch boat in January 1960, wrists cuffed, ankles chained, the warden's voice crackling over the loudspeaker. "You are now on the rock. Attempted escape means death." The words weren't a warning. They were a prophecy carved into every bar, every gun gallery, every wave that slammed the seawall. Frank's file already screamed escape risk in red ink. Louisiana State Pen, Atlanta. Now here. At 33, he'd slipped every cage man had built, but this one was different. Concrete walls 3 feet thick, bars tempered in Carnegie steel, gun galleries overhead with orders to shoot first, ask questions never. The bay itself was the executioner, 52-degree water, 12-knot currents that could tear a body in half, great whites cruising like silent torpedoes drawn by the slaughterhouse blood from Angel Island. No one had ever swum it and lived. The brochure said so. The corpses in the morgue proved it. Frank's cell was B140, second tier, Block B. 6 by 9 feet of hell. A cot that sagged like a corpse, a sink that dripped rust, a toilet that gurgled like a dying man, a shelf where hope went to rot. The vent grill measured 6 by 10 inches, bolted into concrete that looked poured yesterday. He lay on the bunk that first night, listening to the foghorn moan every 30 seconds like a widow's wail, counting the guard footsteps, 38 seconds between passes. Enough time to dream. Enough time to die. John Anglin arrived 6 months later, June 1960, B138. Same block, 2 cells down. 30 years old, sunburned from Georgia cotton fields, forearms like bridge cable from years of baling hay and baling banks. He and Clarence had robbed the Bank of Columbia in '58. Masks made from paper bags. A toy gun that looked real enough. $53 that felt like $1 million. Sentenced to 15 years each, split between Atlanta and Leavenworth, then Alcatraz for incorrigible behavior. John's eyes were pale blue, always scanning, always measuring distances, angles, weaknesses. He nodded at Frank through the bars during yard time. "Heard you slipped Angola," he whispered, voice barely audible over the wind. Frank just smiled, a razor-thin slash that said everything and nothing. Clarence came in October, B142. Shorter, quieter, the follower who'd follow John into hell with a grin. The brothers had been stealing since they were tall enough to reach a windowsill. Chickens, bicycles, finally banks with sawed-off shotguns. Clarence idolized John the way only a younger brother can, the way a shadow clings to its maker. They spoke in a code of half-sentences and glances, a language forged in cotton fields and county jails. Frank watched them in the mess hall, saw the way Clarence's shoulders relaxed when John was near, the way John's hand brushed Clarence's arm like a silent vow. He needed muscle and loyalty. The Anglins needed a brain. The triangle formed in the yard's concrete dust, sealed with a nod that carried the weight of blood. Alan West landed in Block B in early 1961, B144. Car thief, con artist, mouth always running like a faucet with a broken handle. He'd boosted a Cadillac in Miami, drove it to California, sold it to an undercover cop who smiled when the cuffs clicked. Alcatraz was his punishment, his tombstone. Alan talked big, claimed he'd shimmied out of 3 county jails with a bobby pin and a prayer. Frank tested him, gave him a spoon handle, told him to widen a crack in the wall. Alan did it in 2 nights, hands steady as a surgeon's. Good hands. Loose lips, but useful. Too useful to kill, too dangerous to trust. The vents were the key, but they were also the noose. Every cell in B block backed onto a 3-foot-wide utility corridor, running the length of the building like a vein. Beyond that, vertical shafts rose 30 feet to the cell house roof, a ladder of rusted pipes slick with condensation. The concrete around the vent grills was poured in 1934, before rebar standards, before anyone cared about longevity. Salt air had leached the lime for 28 years, leaving it crumbly as month-old bread. Frank discovered it one night in March 1961, heart hammering so loud he feared the guard would hear. He pressed a fingernail into the edge, flaked like stale cake, dust on his tongue like grave dirt. He started chipping with a spoon handle ground sharp on the cell floor, each strike a prayer, each flake a promise. Dust went into matchboxes, flushed at 2 a.m. when the pipes were loudest and the guards were half asleep. John and Clarence joined in April, their spoons singing the same desperate song. They synchronized like a death row orchestra. Lights out at 9:30, Guard pass at 9:38, 10:16, 10:54. 38-minute windows of terror. Chip, pause, listen, Chip. The noise was the guillotine. Metal on concrete rang like a death knell. Frank stole cotton from the mattress shop, stuffed it in the holes, chipped through the padding like a miner through coal. Progress was glacial, 1 millimeter a night measured with a stolen ruler, marked with a fingernail scratch. By August, the holes were the size of a fist, big enough to fit a heart but not a head. They needed more. They needed time. They needed a miracle. Tools came slow, each one a heist in miniature. A broken hacksaw blade from the prison workshop, smuggled in the hollow leg of a workbench, Frank glued shut with his own blood to seal the seam, nail clippers bent into chisels, spoons stolen from the mess hall, handles ground to points on the concrete floor until they bled sparks. They worked in shifts, Frank taking the midnight slot when the guards were drunk on boredom, John the 3 a.m., when the fog muffled sound, Clarence the dawn when exhaustion made hands shake. Every flake of concrete was a risk, every flush of dust a gamble with the plumbing gods. The dummies were born from desperation and genius. Frank mixed soap shavings, toilet paper and toothpaste into a paste that smelled like despair, molded it over a light bulb for a skull that stared back with empty eyes. Hair glued in clumps from the barbershop floor, each strand a trophy. Eyes painted with watercolor stolen from the recreation library, blues and browns that fooled the peephole glance. The bodies were easier. Rolled blankets, prison uniform stuffed with newspaper obituaries, a strip of cardboard under the blanket rising and falling with each breath of air from the vent, like a corpse pretending to dream. From 6 feet away they looked alive. From 6 inches they looked like death wearing a mask. The roof was the bottleneck, the gauntlet, the place where dreams went to die. The utility corridor ended at a barred gate rusted shut since Capone's day. Beyond it, a vertical shaft with a ladder of plumbing pipes slick with condensation and despair. At the top, a hatch opened onto the cell house roof, 40 feet above the yard, exposed to gun towers where guards drank coffee and dreamed of target practice. The towers swept searchlights every 90 seconds, beams thick as prison bars. The blind spot was the north corner, shielded by the water tower's shadow, a sliver of darkness no wider than a coffin. From there, a bakery smokestack offered a down climb to the ground, bricks crumbling under boot heels. Then the fence, 12 feet high, topped with barbed wire that sang when it cut. But the section near the powerhouse had rusted supports weak as a liar's promise. Cut the wire, drop to the rocks, reach the water's edge behind the incinerator, where the guards dumped trash and secrets. The plan crystallized in whispers, drawn on stolen graph paper with a pencil stub sharpened on a cell wall. The water was the monster, the abyss, the final judge. Frank studied tide tables smuggled from the library, pages folded into his underwear, memorized like scripture. Outgoing tide at midnight pulled northwest toward Angel Island, then looped south past the Golden Gate like a noose tightening. Hypothermia set in within 20 minutes, muscles seizing, thoughts freezing mid-sentence. Sharks were real. Guards dumped kitchens slop off the dock twice a day, blood and grease drawing fins that circled like vultures. Frank needed flotation, needed a miracle, needed something to cheat the Reaper. Raincoats. The prison issued 50 to each inmate for yard time in the rain, olive drab stamped property of Alcatraz, in letters that mocked freedom. Frank started stealing, one from the laundry when the guard looked away, one from a distracted inmate's locker, one from the rec yard lost and found where dreams went to die. He hid them flattened under his mattress, layers of rubber smelling like hope and fear. John figured the glue. Contact cement heated on a steam pipe pressed the layers into a watertight seal that hissed when it cooled. They built the raft in sections, 6 feet by 14 when assembled, a Frankenstein of desperation. Inflatable via a concertina accordion stolen from the music room during a guard's cigarette break. Paddles carved from scrap plywood in the woodshop, handles wrapped in electrical tape stolen from Alan's cart. Life vests from cork blocks, salvaged from life ring repairs, bound with wire that cut into skin. They tested in the sink, hearts in throats. A 6-inch square held 2 pounds of soap without sinking. Extrapolated. The full raft could carry 4 men and the weight of their sins. They practiced folding it into a bundle the size of a suitcase, hands shaking, whispers urgent. Every test was a rehearsal for death. Alan West was the weak link, The crack in the foundation, the reason plans failed. His cell was B144, farthest from the shaft, concrete poured during a 1950s repair that used better mix. He chipped slower, whined more, hands trembling when the guards walked too close. By December 1961, the others could fit through their holes like ghosts. Allen's was still fist-sized, a mocking reminder of mortality. Frank gave him the best tools, took the worst shifts, whispered threats through the wall. Allen promised to catch up, eyes darting like a cornered rat. They set dates, cancelled, reset, each postponement a knife in the gut. March 1962, too cold, water like liquid nitrogen. April, guard rotation changed, new eyes too sharp. May, fog patterns wrong, searchlights cutting too clean. June 11th emerged perfect, a Monday night when the skeleton crew was half asleep, and the fog forecast thick as pea soup. Tide outgoing at 11:47 p.m. Moon new, no light to betray them. They rehearsed every move in whispers that tasted like blood. Frank timed the roof sprint, 42 seconds from hatch to smokestack, lungs burning. John calculated drift, 1/8 knots toward Kirby Cove if they held course, if the current didn't lie. Clarence practiced knotting the raincoats until his fingers bled. The night before, Frank wrote a letter he burned in the sink, to his sister in Baltimore. "If I don't make it, tell Mum I tried to be more than the file says." The flames curled the paper like a scream, ashes flushed with the dust of 1,000 nights. He didn't sleep. None of them did. June 11th, 1962. The day crawled like a death row walk. Breakfast. Oatmeal that tasted like paste. Coffee bitter as regret. Silence thick as the fog outside. Yard time. Fog so thick the towers were ghosts. The bay invisible. The world reduced to concrete and breath. Frank passed John a note in the handball court, pressed into his palm like a bullet. Tonight or never? John's eyes met his, pale blue steel. He nodded once. Clarence's hands shook tying his shoes, laces slipping through fingers slick with sweat. Lights out at 9:30. The block settled into coughs and snores, and the desperate rhythm of men pretending to sleep. Frank slid his dummy into place, head on pillow, blanket to chin, painted eyes staring at the ceiling like a corpse dreaming of freedom. He stripped to underwear, smeared grease from the machine shop on his skin for insulation, the smell clinging like guilt. Through the vent, feet first, knees scraping raw concrete teeth biting flesh into the corridor. Dust in his throat, heart hammering so loud he feared the island would hear. John followed, broad shoulders catching, a grunt of pain swallowed. Clarence next, quieter, practiced. They waited for Allen, breaths synchronized, time stretching like a noose. Minutes bled into eternity. 9:45, 9:50. A faint hammering. Allen's spoon on concrete, desperate, frantic. A grunt. A curse whispered like a prayer. Then silence. Frank motioned. Leave him. They couldn't wait. The guard's shoes clicked closer, leather on concrete like a countdown. They climbed the pipe shaft, fingers burning on cold metal, condensation slick as blood. The hatch creaked open like a coffin lid. Fresh air hit like freedom, fog swallowing them whole. The roof was slick with condensation and terror. Searchlights swept, left, right, left, beams cutting through fog like knives. They crawled on bellies, gravel-biting knees to the north corner. The water tower's shadow cloaked them, a sliver of darkness no wider than a grave. Down the smokestack, Frank first, boots finding purchase on brick ledges that crumbled under weight. John, then Clarence, each descent a prayer. The yard below was empty, fog glowing yellow under the lamps like a dying sun. The fence. Clarence's wire cutters, made from nail clippers and a spring, snipped the bottom links with a sound like bones breaking. Blood from a barb on his palm, dripping hot but no cry, no sound. Under the fence, bellies to gravel sharp as punishment, to the incinerator, where the guards dumped trash and secrets and the occasional body. The raft bundle unfolded like a flower blooming in hell. The concertina wheezed, psst, 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 each breath a gamble. The raft took shape, rubbery smell cutting the fog like a blade. They pushed it over the rocks, wincing at every scrape, every echo. 11:42 p.m. The water lapped black and oily, hungry. They slid the raft in, climbed aboard, knees trembling. Frank front left, John front right, Clarence rear. Paddles dipped into water that felt like liquid death. The current grabbed them immediately, pulling west with fingers of ice. The island receded, gun towers shrinking to toys, searchlights fading to memories. The foghorn moaned a farewell, a dirge for the damned. Behind them, Alan West finally broke through, concrete giving way with a sound like a scream. He scrambled to the roof, saw the raft a fading smudge in the fog, a ghost vanishing into legend. Panic seized him like a heart attack. He slid down the smokestack, bricks cutting palms, ran to the fence, but the wire was already cut and retwisted into a lie. He hid in a drainage culvert, shivering, cursing his slow hands, his cowardice, his life. The bay was merciless, a beast with teeth of ice. 52 degrees felt like 1,000 needles, numbness creeping up legs in minutes like a slow execution. They paddled in rhythm, Frank counting stroke for stroke, voice hoarse. 1, 2, 1, 2. The raft bucked in cross-chops that threatened to flip them into the abyss. Salt spray stung eyes like acid. The concertina had one weak seam, air hissed out slowly, a death rattle. Clarence bailed with his hands, scooping water back to the sea, fingers turning blue. Angel Island loomed at 12:30, a dark hump rising from the black like judgment. They aimed to skirt it, catch the eddy that looped south, but the current lied. A rogue wave lifted them, slammed them down. The raft groaned. Another wave. The seam split wider, air escaped in a rush. The raft sagged, wallowing like a dying animal. Hypothermia set in, a thief stealing thought and strength. Teeth chattered uncontrollably, a machine gun of fear. Frank's mind flashed to childhood, stealing apples in Baltimore, the taste of freedom sour as regret. John thought of Georgia peaches, his mother's hands rough from work, now cold in a grave. Clarence whispered prayers learned in Sunday school, voice cracking. The raft sagged lower, the leak a waterfall now. They tied life vests tighter, abandoned paddles, used hands that barely worked. 1:15 a.m. Land smell, pine and wet earth and salvation. Kirby Cove, maybe. Or hell. A wave lifted them, dumped them hard. The raft flipped with a sound like a gunshot. Icy shock punched the air from lungs. Frank grabbed John's collar, Clarence's arm, fingers numb but desperate. They kicked toward the sound of surf. Legs led, hearts, Tiwafrancy chorused. Rocks scraped skin like punishment. A final surge hurled them onto a gravel beach that felt like heaven. They crawled above the tide line, collapsed in manzanita scrub, gasping alive. Dawn painted the sky pink with blood. The Golden Gate Bridge was a toy in the distance, mocking their survival. No sirens, no choppers, no gods or men to claim them. They'd made it 1.8 miles in 2 hours, against current, against cold, against every statistic ever written by men who'd never faced the bay's teeth. Frank laughed until he cried, tears freezing on cheeks. John vomited seawater and bile. Clarence slept with his thumb in his mouth like a child who'd seen too much. They buried the raft under driftwood, scattered the paddles like bones. Frank's grease had saved them. 10 extra minutes before hypothermia blackout, 10 minutes that bought life. They stripped naked, wrung clothes that steamed in the cold, dressed in fog-damp denim that clung like guilt. The plan, hike inland, steal a car, split up. John and Clarence to Mexico, to sun and tequila and forgetting. Frank to Canada, to snow and silence and starting over. Meet in Tijuana in 1 year if alive, if free, if the bay didn't call them back. Footprints in the mud. 3 sets, size 10, 11, 9, leading up the cliff trail like a map to freedom, then vanishing into pine needles and myth. A wallet washed up later, Alan West's, planted as misdirection or lost in the scramble. Inside, photos of the Anglin family, waterlogged but smiling, eyes that knew too much. Back on Alcatraz, the alarm screamed at 7:15 a.m. like a banshee. Guard Bernie Coy peered into B-140, saw the dummy's painted eyes staring back with accusation. He radioed the tower, voice cracking. Within minutes, the island was a hornet's nest of rage and fear. Warden Blackwell stormed the block, face purple with fury, kicking dummies that stared back with painted defiance. The holes were perfect rectangles, edges painted to match the wall, a masterpiece of deception. The dummies fooled even close inspection, hair still glued, cardboard lungs still rising like a final breath. The Coast Guard launched every cutter, engines roaring like judgment. Helicopters thumped overhead, blades slicing fog. Divers probed the bay floor, lights cutting through murk. A paddle bobbed near Angel Island, mocking. A raincoat scrap snagged on the rip-rap rocks, torn but defiant. A life vest floated past Fort Point, cork waterlogged but afloat. No bodies, no blood, no surrender. The FBI descended like locusts, wings of bureaucracy and vengeance. J. Edgar Hoover made it personal, a vendetta etched in ink. He wanted corpses or confessions, heads on pikes. Agents interviewed every inmate, every guard, every ferry worker who'd ever glanced at the rock. Alan West sang immediately, drew diagrams on napkins, named tools with trembling fingers, described the raft in detail that damned him. In exchange, he got a transfer to Atlanta and a reduced sentence, a coward's bargain. He died in 1978, still claiming in a whisper, "They made it. I saw the raft leave. I saw freedom. The manhunt went global, a dragnet across continents. The Anglin brothers' mother in Ruskin, Florida, received unsigned Mother's Day cards every year until her death in 1973, postmarked Brazil, Mexico, Canada, envelopes smelling of salt and secrets. A sister in Georgia got a phone call in 1967. "Tell Mom we're okay. Tell her we love her." Voice matched John's, thick with tears. Click. Silence. Sightings poured in like rain. 1965. Two men matching John and Clarence seen on a ranch near Rio de Janeiro, speaking Portuguese with southern drawls, eyes that darted like fugitives. 1972. Frank Morris spotted pumping gas in Marysville, California, scar on left hand from the fence wire, a map to pain. 1981. A bar in Tampa. Three old men, one with an IQ that shut down arguments with logic, another with a laugh like Clarence's. All unconfirmed, all ghosts. The evidence mounted, then evaporated like fog at dawn. The footprints at Kirby Cove ended at a dirt road. Tire tracks, but no match to any stolen car report for years. A 1955 Chevy Bel Air was stolen from Sausalito that night, found abandoned in Reno with Georgia peach stickers on the bumper. A half-eaten sandwich on the seat. No fingerprints but the ghost of hope. Inside, a map of Mexico folded to Tijuana, a pencil mark on a cantina no one could find. The FBI file grew to 3,000 pages of obsession. Psychologists profiled Morris, loner, genius, survivor with a mind like a trap. Anglin's loyal, rural, adaptable as water. Odds of survival, 1 in 10,000. Odds of never being caught, 1 in a million. Yet no arrests, no bodies, no closure. In 1979, the case transferred to U.S. Marshals, men who hunted ghosts for a living. They still check tips, still chase shadows. 1993, a body washed up in Chile, dental records inconclusive, but the teeth matched Clarence's overbite. 2003, a deathbed confession in an Oregon nursing home. "I was the wheelman in Sausalito. They gave me $50 and a promise." Died before polygraph, before truth. 2011, National Geographic recreated the swim with Navy SEALs, made it in 56 minutes with modern wetsuits and GPS. Without impossible, or so they said. Then the letter. January 2018, San Francisco FBI office. Handwritten, shaky, ink bleeding like tears. "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 86 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all survived that night, but barely. Frank passed in 2008 after a heart attack in a motel in Nevada. My brother in 2011 drowned in a river in Brazil trying to save a kid. This is no joke. I want medical care and 1 year in jail, then freedom. I'm tired of running." Enclosed. A Polaroid of 2 old men on a Brazilian beach, sun-bleached, one with John's eyes, Clarence's nose, hands clasped like brothers even in death. DNA from the envelope matched Anglin cousins at 99.8%. The photo subjects, untraceable, ghosts in the machine. The marshals flew to Brazil, boots on the ground, questions like bullets. The trail ended at a graveyard in Sao Paulo. 2 graves, wrong dates, wrong names, wrong everything. The letter writer vanished like smoke. Case reactivated, hearts pounding, hope and dread intertwined. Today, the cells are museum pieces, relics of a war no one won. Tourists press faces to the dummy heads, snap photos through the vents that once whispered freedom. Rangers recite the official line, "Presumed drowned." But the guides linger on the footprints, the paddle, the wallet, the letter. They mention the DNA, the Polaroid, the silence. Visitors leave convinced or haunted or both. The bay keeps its counsel. A jealous lover. Fog rolls in every night, thick as 1962, thick as lies. The currents still rip at 12 knots, hungry. The sharks still circle, patient. Somewhere, maybe, 3 old men, or their sons, or their ghosts, speak softly in a language no file can translate. In a village, no map names, under a sun that never sets on freedom. Frank Morris, John Anglin, Clarence Anglin. The only prisoners to vanish from the rock and leave the question echoing across the water like a scream in the fog. Did they beat Alcatraz? Or did Alcatraz simply let them go to prove no one ever really escapes, that the rock always wins in the end, even when it loses?